Do you remember when you knew you wanted to be a writer, when you wanted to try and make a living with words? Because that seems an impossible thing to think about making a living at if you're thinking about money. I got to make money.
I think one of the gifts my folks gave me is that I was never financially driven, and it comes from being upper middle class, and being born in privilege in that way. As far as the writing aspect goes, a lot of the stuff I do is about mentors. And the story I don't tell a lot is when I was a high school kid, all I cared about was, finding free beer and playing sports. And, in between when you're on a team and couldn't drink and couldn't smoke pot, you would, just fill all your dead time with nothing. And there was my buddy who played college football, another big guy. We used to just sneak out of high school and drink beers at Peach Lake across the street. And there's an English teacher, and you had to write stories and for the class and stuff. And he said, "Hey, why not 2 days a week instead of going and being fuck-ups and coming back here to high school buzzed? You guys meet me in my free period, and we just shoot the shit about movies, TV, whatever." And he was an amazing guy. His name was Bob Cox. I named the character Dr. Cox in Scrubs after him. And when I was a junior in high school, he said, "You're not a great student, but every time you write dialogue," and he had been a journalist at one point, he's like, "It's really, really good. And I don't know how you can make a living out of this, but there's 1,000 different ways, to pursue writing." He's the first guy that said, "You can do this one thing in school that you don't hate and make a living at it." And I got stuck in my head, and I started consuming television and films and stand-up comedy like a crazy person. And I can't tell you how lucky I was, man. I literally went out after college knowing nobody west of the Mississippi, and just got really, really lucky really fast.
That's all it took to make me think that I could write. It was never career-based. It was just a high school teacher making me care about words and telling me I was good at something. It could have been anything at the time. I had no idea what I wanted to be, but why do you choose mentors so often as a theme?
Because, man, what a gift that we don't talk about enough. And, I will tell you, as I get deeper into the business, I bet you have this, whether it's in radio or podcasting or journalism, you cross paths with men and women that were, you just said about Anquan Bolden when we were talking a little before, that were just as talented, if not more so than you, but nobody tapped them on the shoulder and said, "I'll help you find your way," And man, the weirdest thing about going out to LA to do it, to try and make it in any, fashion in the arts, is you're immediately, if you're social, in a pack of other people, like-minded people trying to do the same, men and women. And you will go, "Wow, she's an amazing actress. She's an amazing director. He's an amazing writer." And 10 years later, of that group of 10, there's usually one other person still there. Everybody.
Because what is it? Is it the machine choose you up?
Well, if you can't get in, you get flushed out fast, because it is an expensive place to live, and it is a grind to live there if you don't get in past the door. Every year, another 20,000 people that want to do what you're doing, they're a year younger than you, come out. It's just an ongoing cycle.
You didn't do struggle and fear then? You get there and you just immediately get lucky? You don't, I mean, even Billy Bob Thornton talks about running out of money and eating baked potatoes for a month because you just go out there with a dream and you think you can get in the rooms, and then all of a sudden you realize it's expensive and you don't have money.
Right. Look, the biggest benefit, and I think everybody has to acknowledge, getting out there knowing that if you can't make your rent for a couple months, you can call Dad and he'll go, "I'll help you out." But if you can't make it work in 6 months, you have to split. That is such a leg up, on so many people that are out there. I got out there at 21. I was doing stand-up and making no money, and painting houses and living in a really shitty apartment.
But wait a minute, are you choosing at this point? Do you think you're a stand-up comic?
Yeah. I went up there. I thought I was going to be a stand-up comic, and wasn't sure about comedy writing.
Even harder than writing, then. Even harder than merely writing, even though I know stand-up comedy is writing as well. But you're choosing not just the hardest path. This isn't about a high school teacher telling you that you're a good writer. You have now chosen, no, I want to be the best writer. I want to be someone who can stand in front of people with the expectation of funny and still make them laugh.
You know what? It's just what you fall in love with as a kid, though, right? So to me, when I started burying myself in it, the different comics, I fell in love with TV and film, but I also fell in love with these stand-ups, you know, and could still do their bits verbatim and still follow it to this day. It's an easy, painful lesson to learn when you get out there, because in LA, you know, I got to a point that I knew I could probably do it and get paid to do it, not just do open mics, but you would still on a random night be somewhere where you'd be like, oh, I did really well. And then the next person you would see, you would go, oh, I can't do that. You know what I mean? That person is just ridiculous.
No, and who is that person? Because if you start giving the names, you'll realize that you're swimming, as great as you are at what you do.
Yeah.
There are, I mean, throughout the history of time, stand-up comedians, there are not that many who are great, and you've got them before you and after in the lineup because you're fighting the best now for what would be the future of comedy, right?
Yeah. I was lucky that William & Mary is not a Hollywood school. It's where I went to college. Before me and after me, 2 years older than me was Jon Stewart, and 1 year younger than me was Patton Oswalt. And so when I got out to L.A., what was really interesting was going, oh, I want to be a comic, you know, and then seeing those guys making it happen very quickly, you know, whether you're huge fans or not, both of them had such a specific voice. You know, they weren't just standing up telling jokes, you know, and you could see not a lot of people know that Jon Stewart before The Daily Show was a comedian, but even then you could go, oh, this dude, you know, whatever he finds, he's going to crush it. You know, he's just going to crush it.
And you don't lack for confidence. So you're arriving at, you come in, I don't know if it's irrationally confident, but you have good reason to think, because you've stacked successes on top of each other without a great deal of struggle, to think that you could do that too, that you could be a stand-up comic who made a good living that way. What deterred you? That? Was it the realization, I can see these people are better than I am?
The best metaphor for my business, which people don't realize, is professional sports and or sports in general. You can think you're a good high school basketball player, and then I always tell people this one story. I was a really good tennis player in high school. I thought I was going to play in college. It helped me get into school. I got there, and you play these little ladder match things in the summer. And I played against one of the guys on the team, and William & Mary is not a great program, but they recruit from South America. And I'm tall, and I have a big serve. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to serve this guy off the court. And I remember, you know, being 18, and the guy across the way was probably 5'3", 5'4", fast. And I served a big serve down the tee, and he took one step and just flicked it by me. And I just remember going, oh, no.
You said it out loud. He made it, and you were confident when you unleashed a bomb at him. You're going to dwarf this little man with your big serve, and he flicks it back at you, and
just casually, not even a big moment for him, just casually walks to the ad side, and you just in your head you go, oh, that 18 years I spent practicing this sport meant nothing.
What?
Oh no!
And to feel that in comedy, though, to walk up on a stage and then have Jon Stewart follow you, or
just even go out and go, oh, there's an open mic later tonight at 11 when no one's here, and so I'll be here at 9 o'clock, and you're watching somebody that is your age, and they're doing something. They're not standing there telling jokes they wrote, even if they're trying material out. You're like, I could watch this person talk for an hour. This is insane. This is not going to be my path. You know?
Do you agree? I think Neil Brennan has said this on South Beach
He's so funny,
Sessions.
by the way. Yeah.
He's great, and he just says stand-up is the hardest thing.
Hardest thing in the world.
More than directing, more than anything. In all of entertainment, that it is the hardest thing.
It is. I'm so in awe of the men and women that crush at it. I still act like a fan. I am not tongue-tied around athletes, celebrities, anything. The iconic comedians, you know, I'd still find I find it so amazing to just be you and a mic and and knowing from trying it a couple times how bad it can go, man, and how painful
that's
it is.
why I think it's brave, though. The expectation, like I really do think I can't do it, and can't even imagine myself summoning the courage to think about doing it, even if I thought that my writing was funny. Doing that in front of people with the expectation of funny is terrifying.
Oh, it's horrifying. But look, I'm lucky that I wasn't good because it got chased out. You know what happened is very young. It's my first big break. Two guys named, one of them's passed away. Did you ever see that movie Man on the Moon about Jim Carrey playing Andy Kaufman?
Yes.
Danny DeVito played one of my managers. I got signed by these two older guys, George Shapiro and Howard West, and they managed only stand-up comics, Jerry Seinfeld, Andy Kaufman in the day, you know. And when the dude signed me, it was really interesting. Howard West, who passed away, he said, you're a very good joke writer, you're a shitty comic. And he signed me as a writer, and he was kind of the guy that pushed my transition into writing stuff.
Was he in the crowd, or how did he make that assessment that there was something between the written word on the page and the delivery, that the jokes are funny, but he's basically cutting through all the bullshit, hitting you right in the heart with, hey, you're good at this part of it, but you're not going to figure out the other part of it, of having whatever the charisma is needed to sell the funny jokes.
Yeah, it was a weird moment because those two guys, because they managed Seinfeld, were the executive producers of that show, and I didn't have any representation. I was painting houses and stuff, and so friends like, why don't I had a connection to them through someone my mom had worked for, and I remember I called them up. I'm like, hey, I want you to read some stuff I wrote, because my buddy's like, why don't you write a couple Seinfeld scripts, because they produce the show, and I sent him a letter that said, if you read this. I know you get this request 500 times a week. If you read it, I promise never to bother you again. And back in the old days, the first year of Seinfeld, there's also stand-up. Jerry would do stand-up at the beginning and then in the middle. So I wrote all the stand-up part. And I think he is one of his younger associates had seen me do stand-up before. And he read it, and he's like, hey, it's not bad. Keep working, but it's not for us. You know, and that was it. And then I'm like, screw it. And a week later, I wrote him a letter. I'm like, hey, I know what I promised last week, but if you read this new script, I promise you, this time I'm for real. I'll never bother you again. And that cracked him up. He read the new thing, and he literally called me back, and he's like, hey, man, the stand-up chunks you wrote for Jerry, he's never going to do them. He writes his own stuff, but they're really funny, and people here have seen you do stand-up before, and you're a really good joke writer and a mediocre performer. And why don't you go write a bunch of scripts? And I did. And this is the weirdest thing. When I handed them in to him 3 weeks later, I was 22 years old. I was on a staff of a TV show called Billy. And I was such a neophyte that the first 3 days there, I didn't have any money. And the first 3 days there, they come by every day at lunch, and they're like, a PA would be like, hey, what do you want for lunch? And I'd be like, no, I'm good, And it was like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then Friday, the showrunner, this older guy, came in. And he's like, hey, fucko, we pay for lunch. And I'm like, oh, dude, I will have a Philly cheesesteak, and fries and all that stuff. So it just happened. I got really, he mentored me and helped me. It's the same theme,
And you appreciate it so much that you insist on it being a weave through what it is that you are chasing in the inspirations. Like your gratitude is such that you insist on it being a place where you get some of your fuel.
I don't know if I want to assume that this is like this for everybody. Okay, in that Hollywood has a bad rap, deservedly in some aspects. One of the good aspects of it, I think, is that there's very few men or women who have made it that didn't get there, at least in part, because of the generosity and selflessness of a mentor figure. Someone has to. It's inevitable. Someone has to go, I find you valid. I'm going to help you. And, my big joke that's coming around now is two of the youngest people I did this for, these guys named Chris Miller and Phil Lord. And they're now these huge titan. They did Into the Spider-Verse and the Lego movies. And when they were kids and animators, I thought they were so talented. And we did a goofy cartoon together called Clone High. It was one of their first gigs. And they were so gracious and grateful about it. And they said, what can we do? And I said, all you owe me is you guys are the guys. Right when my last job happens, because I'm no longer hireable, I get one more last job from you guys. You know what I mean? I get to be around it for another year because it's so fun. And so many people in Hollywood have this story that I think it's, you know, it would be a shame for people to not constantly kind of shine a light on it. I could circle through Gary Goldberg. I created Spin City when I was 26 because Gary Goldberg passed away as well. Created Family Ties and Brooklyn Bridge and all these cool shows. He used to love basketball. I met him on the basketball court. He played Division I against Bill Bradley and all those guys. And we got to know each other in that environment. And he's like, you know, you can do this. You just got to learn how to play the game a little more. And he mentored me. And, you know, he essentially sent me to TV show writing camp, and that there's nowhere to get taught that stuff. And I never would have learned it if somebody hadn't gone. You know.
What I thought of you, though, just from your previous work, not that I knew all of it, though, I would not have expected and could not have foreseen the idea that you strike me as your wit being barbed wire, and the idea that your greatest success would be marked by a syrupy, sweet, funny, gentle show as you age into adulthood and learn whatever you've had to learn about love and parenthood and the wisdoms that come with age. It's funny and interesting and inspiring to see you age in a way that goes from barbed wire melting into something that is sweet, because I couldn't have imagined that that's what the success would be just from what I knew about you from afar.
No, you know, you must have this, man. All right. I've been talking about it a lot with randomly I was talking about this. I was smiling while Dan was saying that because I was talking about this topic with my daughter last night, which is the barbs. I think what comes with age. Do you remember that moment, if you're so quick-witted, and you remember that moment when you were younger that you realized it could be weaponized? You know what I mean? And that you could say, you know, it is both a weapon and a shameful thing to possess when your defense mechanism is I can pick somebody's weakness out, make a joke about it so that other people's hear it and laugh, and I can get validation from that.
And it can get you through high school and cover through some insecurities and get you could not get bullied because you're the guy who makes people laugh. Like, so much of funny comes from there.
Without a doubt. And I told my daughter a story last night, and this is not a flattering story for me. But, you know, everybody, you know, when you're at a dinner party and people bring up a topic like, how many people here have been in a fight? How many people have been, people are all never surprised, but always want to hear the stories. Is I was definitely beaten up a couple of times as a kid, and it was always because of this. I told my daughter a story that there was, and I'll leave names out. There's a high school party when I was a senior in high school, and I kissed a girl that I thought was single, but it turned out she was not single. She was back together with her boyfriend, who was one of those bullies that we all remember, but he was the kid from high school that would never leave town, that didn't go on to college, you know, and I zeroed in. I knew I was going to get beaten up because it was one of those horrible nights where everybody gathers outside of a party in a circle and they're going to watch you. It's like some rite of passage. As one of my friends have one funny version of this story that I'll tell you, but and so they're all circled us, and I knew in my head, I'm like, all right, I'm going to let him hit me twice, and then I'll go down, and then hopefully it'll be over. He's a really big kid. And he said, go ahead, Lawrence, why don't you say something funny now? And I said his name. I said, you know, I would say something funny, but someday you're going to be putting gas in my car.
Oh, there it is.
And I said, and I might need regular. And if you before I got to the word unleaded, he hit me so hard that my friend said, I was wearing Docksiders in Connecticut, shocker, that my friend said my Docksiders were still in the same place, but without my feet in them.
And because you had just hit him from the height of, like with the movie line of condescension, the way that you would write it in a script if you were trying to be the dick who was making the young man infuriating him in a way that makes it earn that he hits you like that.
Here's the point of the story. I go, Charlotte, some people, my daughter, I could tell that as a fun memory. But when I was 24, I came home from L.A. to Connecticut, and I was writing on the show Friends, and I got out of the car from the airport, and he was mowing my lawn. He was working for a local landscaping company, and it didn't feel good at all. I felt like a horrible person and a piece of garbage, and our eyes met, and I know that was a horrible moment for him, because literally the last time we had contact was me saying that to that guy. Do you know what I mean? And you could tell that story if you're a jerk of like, and then he got his because I came home.
My guess is that you probably wanted to go talk to him or something.
Wanted
that you
to,
didn't
I
want
didn't
to just
even know,
lock eyes.
I didn't even know how to do it, man. I was so young. You know what I mean? But it's literally a story that haunts me. I'm telling it to you now. I can see it like it was yesterday. And I think that's the evolution as you grow up, maybe away from the snark, if that makes sense.
It does, because you have remorse about how you would weaponize it for cruelty, because it would allow you to defend yourself against where your insecurities were.
Yeah.
And it can be used for evil, but it can also be used for good. So it is nice to see the idea. Like, it must be hugely flattering to you to win all the awards for the lack of a better way of saying it, your soft show.
Yeah,
like the show of old man has had kids and learned life lessons and learned that, you know, his wife being more competitive and better at things than him is going to be humbling, and he's going to learn to love correctly, love better, and work with his friends on stuff that bring him joy. Like, may everyone have success that looks like that.
Are you kidding? Is such a deeper value to it. And look, you got to be careful, because you and I both know it doesn't mean. I would still tell you one of my favorite TV shows of all time is the show Veep, and that show is men and women coming up with new ways to be horrible to each other, you know, but at least they've created an environment where the snark and the voice of the show, you know what you're getting into when you watch one. So I think there's a place for that stuff, and it still tickles me endlessly. But man, I wanted to exit the world of using, you know, it's still out there a lot, using comedy to hurt people. I mean, it's a topic right now that it's so weird that that's kind of become the shtick, you know what I mean, at least in social media, is, you know, somebody makes a mistake and then who can be the most clever in slamming them, you know, and it's just not for me. You know, I do find it toxic, and I find the difference between really well-crafted snark, you know, based around character comedy, and let's attack human beings that are real to be, it's just, that's a fine line.
Oh, but you've come through the gauntlet of what Hollywood is. So which one's harder? The degree of difficulty, making people laugh with sweet or making them laugh with snark? You've won the awards for the hardest degree of difficulty, right? Making them laugh with sweet, or forcing them to love sweet. There aren't a lot of examples of that. Snark is a good deal easier, is it not?
Yeah, you're right. You know, but I would also, the weirdest thing about how, look, I'm lucky that Stugotz came into my life, because he had a vision of who this guy would be, and just kind and considerate and optimistic in a time that we needed that. But he was also very clear, you know, he's like, you can look at that show. Brett Goldstein, my buddy who plays Roy on that show, he drops F-bombs in every other line, and he still lives in the other world. You know what I mean? And so I think that the trick to it is that it can't be all one or the other. And I think, you know, you consume a culture the same way I do. I guarantee you there's some shows that on one level you'd go, oh, that was a super snarky and biting show, but that what made you love it was an undercurrent of heart. So, you know, I think I've been doing the same thing for a long time, and that it sometimes is in vogue and sometimes is out of vogue.
Well, I wanted to ask you about Stugotz, because it seems like he arrived at this role. Again, I'm judging this from afar, and I imagine you get tired of all the questions of Stugotz. But his journey seems to be a spiritual one that has crawled through some shit, and he feels like he is doing work now that is purposeful to him as an inspiration, given whatever he's learned about whatever mistakes he made, because he was a ladies' man and he was very successful in Hollywood, being a dude who could just charm anybody because of how naturally funny he was.
Look, the thing I can tell you that's great about Jason is that he, you know, he manages to walk that line between, he's not so pretentious that he thinks that our TV show is changing the world, because that would also be insufferable. But that it really matters to him that he gets to, you know, be in a show and be the creator of a show that people will reach out to him personally to say they find it inspiring or comforting.
Well, I think
and
it's the grown up. I think that it's the grown up version of him doing what you're doing. I don't know. Is he younger than you are?
Yeah, he's in his mid-40s. Yeah.
So he lived whatever the Saturday Night Life was, famous, rock star famous, do all the successive comedy stuff, be on the signature show, and then move into a project that has more of his life in it, I guess, like more of what he's learned since then, so he can be at least a publicly sweeter, serene version of himself.
I find it so impressive because I think that he is, meeting the call of responsibility to the character that he's created. But man, what an interesting world to drop yourself into, right? That it's because he is Ted Lasso. You know what I mean? And now I think, in our world of social media, and that's why it's kind of interesting to me and makes sense that Jason's not even on it, is if Ted Lasso wavered, you know what I mean? I think people would be really upset by it, So he's rising to the challenge.
Do you regard it as your best work, or how do you do this? And I don't know necessarily that you rank these things, but it's your most acclaimed work, but you're in some ways the same guy that was doing. I'm guessing you think there are things you've done that might be better than Ted Lasso, but just weren't noticed the same way.
It's the thing that you have to ditch in TV early on is if you rate things personally based on how they're received, you're doomed. You know what I mean? Because you can't control the results. The world is filled with shows that would have been great or pilots that never get made. And so I don't think I think if you went like, hey, what's your most successful show that you're ever involved in? I'd be like, oh, it has to be Ted Lasso and maybe Scrubs, but beyond that, for me, it's the experience. I know when I've done a stinker, I've done a bunch, the experience and the people. And, everybody always asks me, like, what was your favorite show to work on? I'm like, oh, man, the first year of Scrubs, because it's the first year I got to do it all on my own. And I'm still friends with all those people. And we were in a deserted hospital somewhere. It felt like a bunch of students in school making something that no one would ever watch,
But it also represents your hunger being satiated on the dream, right?
Yeah.
If you have your own power to create your own thing without a lot of interference, that had to feel like both a finish line and a starting gun.
It feels, without a doubt, it immediately puts you at a crossroads of what do I want to do next? The second that someone's like, hey, you did what you have to get to do what you want to, and now even though you're very young, you have to say, what do I want to do for the next 10 years? What do I want to do for the next 20 years? And that, that opportunity. Some people have trouble shifting because everybody in that business works hand to mouth for the first part of their career. And it's very weird when you don't even realize it, but somebody has snapped their fingers and said, you don't have to do things anymore unless you want to. It's a slippery slope and you get caught up in, oh, what if I make the wrong decision? What if I make the wrong decision?
But I imagine, too, you were insufferable at having that much success in your 20s and having it come relatively easy compared to the grind. Like, I would imagine that your confidence would swell, Hollywood ego, before you know yourself as a man or even as an adult. My guess is that would be real easy to go to your head.
Yeah, I think you have to be – I was very lucky to have a sense of good friends matter that will constantly knock you down and not let you be that guy. Really, really, really matters. And I had a self-awareness about how silly it all was very early on. I don't know where it came from. I think because my dad and my folks were great about that stuff. But I always fear for these young people that you see, whether it be actors, athletes, writers, whatever, that have instead of gratefulness, it's replaced with I deserve this, and entitlement. And I'm like, ooh, man, this is, a smackdown is coming for you karmically eventually, as a human being.
Were you someone who knew immediately that Scrubs would be successful? Was there any way how would you have measured success at the start of Scrubs?
No, I thought it was going to be a disaster, man. Back then they didn't do single camera shows and nobody really cared. Nobody even came by and it was an afterthought of a show. I was just so happy to be making something with my friends and getting to do something that I used to want to call my production company Noble Failure Productions because I always felt like if you could make something that your friends and family would watch and you wouldn't be embarrassed by it, that you're winning the game, you know? And anything after that was gravy. So the coolest thing about Scrubs is I knew my buddies that I'm still tight with would have gotten a chuckle from it, and that's not what I always did. Sometimes my friends would watch shows I worked on and be like, "What are you doing, man?" I'm like, "What do you mean? And what am I doing? What are you doing at that law firm you work for? Don't worry about it." You know.
How did you know to treat it as silly, and is it sillier? Is all of it sillier than even you could have imagined, given that now you've gone and gotten real success here, and my guess has been just laughably seduced by fraudulent people at everywhere you're walking because now they want to be in your life and they never noticed you before.
Yeah, you know, but you just described what it means to be a writer, Dan. Good job. you know, it's. I think if you maintain the persona of metaphorically the guy or girl that never had a date to their junior prom and now you get to get everybody back for that, you're doomed. Okay. But if you know, to me, the healthiest people of all levels of success in Hollywood are the ones that will gladly sit in front of you and say, I think it's ridiculous to get compensated and treated the way I am for what I would do for an hourly wage. My job is so fun. It is so rare. I enjoy talking to you and all the people here because sometimes we forget that not everybody gets to do something that they love. You know, my father retired. I remember saying he worked his whole career for Pitney Bowes. I said, you miss it? He's like, selling copy machines? He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I don't miss it for a second. You know, and he always says to me, if I ever hear you complaining about your lot in life being paid to write jokes, I'm going to reach through the phone and smack you.
Oh, I can't imagine the number of people listening to this who listen to our show, at least in part, to just try and grind through a terrible work day because they don't love what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they just like to listen for a little while to people who do love what they're doing.
It's a gift, right? And you know, look, and there's an honor. My dad said I did get great joy out of providing for my family. You know, out of us being able to go on a vacation once in a while, you know, and but he's like, no, the second I walked out of that place that I worked from 21 to 60, you know, I didn't think about it another day, you know, and I'm like, oh my God, I think I'll remember what I do forever. You know, I love it so much.
But I think creatives, like their soul falls as if an anchor landed on it at the thought of trudging to somewhere where you're trying to, whatever, make people laugh, make people hope, make people think, whatever it is that you're looking to do with whatever it is that you make. The idea that is a really special kind of unhappy death.
Yeah.
If I had been an engineer, if I had followed my path that was laid out for me by Cuban exiles of just go down the safe ones, you know, doctor, lawyer, architect, engineer, just go the safe route. I would have been deeply unhappy in all of them. Yeah. I don't think I would have been successful either because I would have been deeply unhappy in all of them.
And the amount of people that ended up there at no fault of their own.
Because there was not a mentor to lead you to poke you in the back in a different direction.
And to say, even though this path is laid out for you, there's a scarier path that might be okay. You know what I mean? Man, I'm grateful to those people. I try to shout them out every chance I get.
Well, but this is, Ted Lasso is soaked in gratitude, is it not? Like the entire, the spirit behind it is that, right?
Yes, without a doubt. You know, it is, I remember it when Jason brought in writers and directors to interview. No matter who was in the room, one of the questions we asked each and every one of them was, who was the biggest mentor in your life, whether it was getting you out of trouble, pointing you towards the arts, convincing you weren't a screw up. And the stories were amazing, you know, and it's my favorite thing about the arts, you know, is there's no one without that story. I guarantee you doing what you do, you have it, you know?
Well, I needed permission. Of course, you can't choose a path that is really hard or unconventional unless somebody, when you're young. I mean, I don't know anybody delusionally confident enough to just march up. Like, you seem like you were delusionally confident. Yeah. Maybe you had like some armor that wrapped whatever your insecurities were, but you're a jock. You're making people laugh. You're delusionally confident. You're a screw up because you're probably partying too much. You're probably chasing girls all throughout high high school and your dad is wondering what you're going to do with your life. Yeah. Like, what is he ever going to smarten up and not be somebody who's selling copiers for 40 years?
I'll tell you, I just started laughing because, I mean, you're on the nose, but my dad's last gasp. So when I was out in LA painting houses and struggling, I knew my dad. You knew your dad's friends, right? But I knew him. I wasn't friends with him, okay? And my dad's trick, because my dad wanted to be full. I'm supportive, go for it. As long as you're working hard, I believe in you. But then every 5 weeks, one of my dad's friends would call me and offer me a job and then pretend that my dad didn't put them up to it.
Because he was trying to get you back on a path that was less crazy.
But they were the weirdest phone calls because I'd be like, hello? And it'd be like, hey, Bill, it's Doug Benson. I would be I was like,
it's your dad trying to pull you back toward a saner thing.
I was like, hey, Mr. Benson. He's like, it's Doug. He's like, what popped into my head? There's this great marketing gig here at Pepsi. It's a true story, And I'm like, tell my dad I'm cool. And he's like, what do you mean tell your dad?
He didn't put me up to it. It's just the first phone call I've ever received from Doug Benson. And he's asking me, call me Doug, because he's trying to manipulate me into a different career path.
It's a great job. You can live right here outside of the city where the main place is here in Jersey. I think you'd love it.
Your dad's awkward friends, right? Like your dad's very poor acting older friends trying to connect with a young person.
I get to them all, man. Hey, Bill, Gary Pavin. Oh, hey, Gary.
Please do them all. I want to hear all the pitches that you were accepting as you're physically painting houses. Because you're painting houses trying to make a career of this.
I tell you the closest one, and it's weird because I always remember it. So Gary Pavin was my godfather. He was, and he ran special events at Madison Square Garden. And he, so he wasn't involved with the sports team, but every time there was a circus or a concert or whatever, and he's like, how'd you like to come live in the city and you can do, you'd be writing the press releases and all that stuff and being the liaison for when it's next Saturday, Ringling Brothers comes to town, next Sunday, Bruce Springsteen and the whatever, and it was close, so close in my head and he's like, and the Big East tournament as well, and the whatever, and obviously you could go to anything in the Garden.
So there are a lot of temptations he's putting in front of you. It got the manipulation became more and more sophisticated as we went through Dad's friends.
Well, in my head, I imagine my dad in a war room with his buddies, going like, all right, he's obviously not interested in business equipment or snack foods. If we can get him in the arena of sports, maybe we can get him a job. And I almost said yes to that, and I didn't. And it's a true story. I got my first writing gig like 3 weeks later.
You were genuinely tempted.
I was tempted, but to go back to the East Coast where all my friends were, and Gary was like, you can obviously have tickets to all the events there. Take your buddies to the game in your early 20s to be at outside the Garden.
That's not a mentor. Then that's the universe stepping in to help you with what would be a happier life, right? Because I imagine as you have. I don't know how often you laugh with tears in your eyes. I imagine a great deal given what you do for a living and given the things that you've learned. But I don't know what's being triggered there beyond the funny because you're thinking about how hard your dad was trying to love you from afar in whatever awkward copy salesman way he could. Like, what are you doing, son? Painting houses and trying to write jokes for a living.
Yeah, and to still want to protect I believe in you completely, so I would never tell you to consider another job. So I'm gonna have a bunch of 40-year-old men call up and lie to you.
It's great.
It was insane. It was so funny, man.
But you learn.
Hey, Bill, Jerry Rhodes.
I want to hear all of them. Like I want to hear their entire pitch. I could sit here and just meet all your dad's old friends, people that you had because if your dad's friends were like my dad's friends. Like, not close at all.
No,
just
man.
The awkward people who hung around.
Hey, Mr. Rhodes, that's it.
That's all you got.
That's it for 8 years until he offered me a job at Citibank.
And your initial reaction is, how did he get this number and why is he calling me? I haven't thought about you in 10 years.
Yeah, all right. It's good to talk to you too, I guess. I did. You know what the funniest thing to Jerry Rhodes, because everybody did their same thing, and he's like, look, think about it and call me back. I'm like, I don't feel like I need to think about it, Mr. Rhodes. I'm like, I feel like I can just end the call now and say, no thanks. And he goes, good enough. See you around, kiddo.
So now you've got a long line of your dad's friends marching back to your dad's house. Another failure because they couldn't do the act well enough to lure you out of that.
And each one of them happy to have their obligation over. You know what I mean? It was funny, man. Oh.
Is Hollywood perpetually disappointing to you, or are you just... Yeah. Because you want it to be something better, purer. You want the arts to like, hey, just push people along in a way that's less fraudulent, less cutthroat?
No, you know what? It's because the world we live in right now and how the access to information that everybody has immediately. And what I mean by that is the disappointing stories of Hollywood will always be talked about on your show on everybody's fingertips in 5 minutes. And what bums me out, and my own friends who jokingly called me Hollywood, even to this day still do it because they all stayed in the East Coast. I can't make them believe that 80% of the people that you meet out there are awesome and interesting and fun and not ridiculous and not narcissistic and kind, but you are never going to see videos on social media of what they did last night. You know what I mean? And so I think it's a bummer that the few speak for the many, and I think it's a bummer that the few, unfortunately, have such a huge platform and a huge spotlight. You know, it's literally when these things go down and your friends call you up, like, do you know them? Do you there? Was it, you're like, why would I ever know them? And why would I ever be there? It's just,
but what are you talking about there? Because I don't know what you're referencing. You're saying the 20% that get the fame and the power in Hollywood and do the misbehaving things that are silly and make the rest of the country look at Hollywood and be like, how can you be so disconnected from any real person?
Right.
You're saying that the people with the power there are...
I'm saying that the best metaphor I can think of right now is the news. And no one's going to come on CNN or your local news and go, hey, we're going to do about 15 minutes of really cool, inspiring stories today about people that did nice things and are fighting the good fight and are being kind to each other. You know, I can't think of another business other than maybe professional sports where if an athlete missteps and does something awful, understandably it becomes a story. And then you see the narrative shift to, oh man, these professional athletes are all horrible. And they aren't all horrible. You know what I mean? It's just Hollywood and sports are where let's just bombard people with the worst stories and have it represent the entire industry over and over.
But when you say it's disappointing, why? How? Like, what did you expect? What could be done better? How could you have a more favorable viewpoint of this labyrinth that you've had to climb through in order to...
I'm being selfishly personalizing it, because it's for me amongst my own family and friends. I don't travel in huge Hollywood circles, for me, it's the simple fact of if I was with a friend of mine going, what's it like out there? It's just crazy with people misbehaving and, cheating on their spouses and bad behavior and narcotics and this and that. And I'd be like, no more than any other business. The people I spend time with could be here at your dinner table, and unless you asked them what they did, you would never know it. And they would not be talking about their dough, and they would not be narcissistically talking about themselves over and over and over without asking questions about you. It's I just think it's one of those things that the stereotype is so ingrained. I mean, look, we talked a little bit about the Oscars. What a step back for anybody. If I weren't in the business, I myself would be going, oh, those people are so ridiculous that they think that this is okay behavior on any level, And it's just one of those industries that the misbehavior of the few stereotypically becomes the representation of the many. Because I've met some of the kindest mentors and some of the most interesting people out there. And yeah, I've seen the crazy too, but the first thing outweighs the second.
How did you go about with the meticulousness of planning the rest of your career once insanity arrives at your doorstep and you can have any project you want? You can do after Ted Lasso, I think you would have the freedom to call your own shot on just about anything you've ever wanted to create in your life.
You really have to think I think you're doomed if you get caught up in this the rat race aspect of I gotta best what I did before. You know, I gotta. If you think that there weren't magical forces and lightning striking involved in grabbing a brass ring once in a while, then you're doomed because you're going to keep trying to recreate that experience. You never will. So for me, I think the biggest thing was the realization that 1 out of every 2 things, if you're amazing, 2 out of every 3 things, if you're just really good, is going to be an absolute disaster. That frees you up to go, let's not worry about how it turns out. What are you going to prioritize? And for me, looking at the way you do things, my favorite things are when you can sense that people are working with friends and people they would want to be around with anyways. So I prioritized, for me, doing projects with people that I would want to spend time with were it not work, doing things that even if they're going to fail, I'm tickled. I've been doing this forever. When I walk in, and I'm making a TV show out of Carl Hyacint's books. And he was a guy I used to read and look up to. He's like, I'm tickled every day, man. I'm like, this is so ridiculous.
What makes the writer's room special, or what makes the best writer's rooms, and how many fights are there in the Ted Lasso writing room because everybody wants to get their shots off? Like, what is the experience of a writer's room like? I know many guys, many people, creatives like you who are attracted to the silliness that we do have pointed out to me that this ends up being an improv writer's room,
It's very much like a writer's room,
whether you know it or not, that the whole show is that.
It's the best. It's been a really weird evolution because I'm old enough that the first writer's rooms I was in were the writing staff would honestly be 8 white dudes and a woman, you know, and man, the evolution from that to where it is now is as rapid and as all-encompassing as when we say, like, oh, we didn't have cell phones when we were kids, and how much different that is for people now, you know. But the best thing about it is that your job can be throwing on shorts and a T-shirt, going to a place that in the best rooms that you're made to feel safe about revealing embarrassing, shameful, ridiculous, funny things about yourself might lead to something creative. Telling a story like I told you about the dude that hit me out of my shoes, and wasn't wearing socks, by the way, either. That's another image for everybody.
You weren't wearing socks.
I wasn't wearing socks.
So the Docksiders are there, but of course you are the 16-year-old in every movie you watched in childhood.
I'm James Spader in all with his sleeves rolled up.
But you even look like it's all of it. You've got the punchable face. You have you as a 16-year-old condescending the bully, and the film version of it having just panned to the shoes, and those are the shoes, of course, and they're some level of new. They're fancy. They're very.
They probably have little tassels on them. You know?
That area of the country, Dad worked hard to make sure you have nice shoes.
Yeah, in the movie, my body would have been like 5 feet further back from my shoes because he would have hit me that far out of them. But
before you got to unleaded.
Yeah, but exactly. But otherwise, it was the exact same as you would have shot it in a film. It was fantastic and bloody too. You know, it just blood all over my face.
And you thought it worth it, which seems like a special kind of 80s movie 16-year-old dick that you're like, I know how this is gonna end, but I'm gonna get my shot off first, and then I'm gonna regret it. And yeah, we've got to find that person and like bring you two together and have a healing moment. The idea that you would then grow up and feel bad about that years later.
I've connected with him, and we're good. I just don't want to ever mention his name because in a way, because it's not right.
I know. I understand. I understand why you're telling the story. It's funny, and you're also ashamed, but that's not who you are anymore.
Yeah, man. It still haunts me though. By the way, it reminded me too because I used to have all these rules that one of my buddies, because he's I had big friends. So the guy I told you about that my mentor, Mr. Cox, used to hang out with us at lunch with. He was 6'8", weighed 240 pounds, offensive lineman in college, and that was even a worse thing for me in high school because it was like, oh, I can say anything and not usually get beaten up because he's standing next to me. His name's Rick Street, great guy. Real community leader now too, and done great things with his life. But occasionally, if he thought my behavior was bad, because he was a much better person than I was, he would be like, "You're on your own," and I'd look over for him, and he would be gone, And
that's one way of teaching.
And one of our favorite discussions was, I'm like, now, you know what? It doesn't worry me, because the way high school works, high school fights especially, if you take 2 shots and go down, the other guy wins and it's over. And one of the times I got beaten up, dude hit me and I went down. And this is a freshman year in college. And then when I was on the ground, he grabbed my ears and was banging my head into the ground. And then afterwards, my friend Rick was like, yeah, he broke your rules. He broke the fights over you won rules.
But you've been getting in trouble with your mouth all your life, correct?
Yeah.
And it's because, and what? Is it because you wield it like a knife, even in adulthood? Because I can imagine this would make an appearance in pickup basketball games, even as an adult.
I still relish places you're allowed to do it if it's a safe space. And like the joke I told you that I'd say in basketball, I have my own basketball game now. And I rent the gym. All the guys were all friends. There's no special treatment for anybody. But one of the fun things in that game is you can talk smack and make jokes with the undercurrent that it's not personal, because you all love each other. And I relish those when it's safe. I never do it out of a safe environment anymore.
What is it about Gary Shandling used to have a famous game, correct?
Yeah.
That had all of those comedians in it, and all of them were
game
playing.
Wasn't good enough, Dan.
It was a weaker man's game. It's not as good as the game that you're in, right? You're here to tell people, this is going to get aggregated, that the late Gary Shandling's games didn't have any real ballers in it.
No, you know what? I'll go back, because it's there's people love the game. Kevin Nealon played in that game for a long time, and that dude is shockingly tall, and his elbows line up right with the brow above your eye, and he can play. And but I think there was a spirit of fun and camaraderie in that game and love. And I always gravitated to games that were more about, for the next couple hours, it's not personal. Let's cut each other out.
Let's feed that cruelty, because we're not allowed to do it anywhere else, because we're too adult now to, because you're wielding a knife, right?
Yeah.
Your mouth, how many times do you think you've gotten beaten up? Did you win any of these fights?
No, I'm not good at fighting. And I'm not a super strong guy.
No, but your mouth would be something. I would imagine that it's double-digit fights where you
because I wised up in college, got thumped a couple times there, and then called it a day.
I would think the pounding of the face, the breaking of the rule,
I would think
that would end.
Well, because it shattered my young person's reality of anybody can take 2 shots and go down, and that other guy gets to feel like he won, and then it's over. You're not going to get hurt. But it's the guy that's like, no, I'm mad enough that I want to do damage to you. And then you're like, yeah, I need to change my way of thinking fast.
I am happy to see your success, and I'm happy to see you rewarded by being able to chase the things that you want to chase, as you've learned enough to appreciate them. It's been very cool to watch you rewarded for things that you probably think you should have been rewarded for a long time ago, but people just noticed because it just got here, because it got on Apple TV, and Sudeikis made it a popular, trendy thing, and then Bill Lawrence gets to finish this 30-year run. What is it? It's about 30 years, right?
Yeah, man. I've been doing this for 31 years now. It's crazy.
So I didn't mean to say finish it, but get it.
It's close to true.
Get it restarted with something that births even more freedom and the ability to actually help some people with being able to pass down, being able to be a mentor to others, because you're handing down opportunity now.
And I'm not being a sycophant, but one of the reasons I'm a fan of this show, besides it's my vibe and it's funny, is for people that don't get to see it up close, you do the same thing here. And it's like-minded in not only the way people treat each other, but watching people, realize opportunity because of seizing opportunity because the opportunity is given to them by somebody else. I find it inspiring. It keeps me going in a time that I think it'd be easy for everybody just to, especially with the way the world is, to just be gloom and doom and pack up and go, I'm going to just vibe and enjoy my family and do nothing else.
I made this so biographical. Thank you. Yes. I'm sorry. Thank you.
No,
but you seem to really be bothered by how cruel things have gotten. You seem
bumps me. Yeah.
I mean, how could it not?
Right? It really does, man. The dialogue out there is so toxic, that when you find people that are trying to ride whatever ship they're on through that storm, man, I want to get on board as much as I can, you know.
But do you find it? Are you finding yourself dispirited, or you hide in your safe spaces because too much of turning on the television or walking outside has division, has conflict, has cruelty, has people not wanting to be grateful or thankful or mentor or whatever the kindnesses are that you're selling that day because you feel them in your heart?
I'm painfully optimistic. Okay, is that I really look, the Ted Lasso experience that people embrace that show. It feeds it for me. I go, wow, man, people are craving this sense of optimism and kindness, you know. And shoot, by the way, not to shine a light on him, I took Roy out to dinner. By the way, is Roy out there? Yeah. So I took Roy out to dinner. I was just poking fun nicely, I promise. And he's such a polite, gracious young guy that.
Not so young anymore.
I know, but I took
he pretends to be young, but he's a million years old.
Okay, good to know. He's older than me. But he was. We went to. You know, I'm like, hey man, I'm taking out dinner. It's on me. And sometimes when you do that, people are, especially because he's so respectful and lovely to me, are very careful to not. Yeah, Roy had no problem ordering whatever the hell he wanted.
No, he's got no problem with that. I've seen him leave Prime 112 with bushels filled with food in his arms, in his shirt pocket.
It gave me joy, man.
He has no, and he's been. I would say that he has eaten more free snacks than anyone in the history of the medium around here, given that he spent 20 years just eating stuff that's around here.
I earned it, Dan. Long career of mine.
Yes, a long career, as he calls you a young man. Thank you for spending the time with us, Bill. I appreciate it. It's always good seeing you.
Anytime. It's cool to be part of the gang. I really appreciate it.